Okay, so I went back onto dummies. I was testing different fields to see if there was anything kind of quirky with them. And I started to do the relentless strikes test again on dummy, and I noticed again I was able to hit it when I shouldn't be able to hit it by my positioning. And this time I did some different things, like I went and turned around and faced in a different direction, and I think I move over to the right here and you'll see that I'm not hitting it, from the same relative position that I was hitting it a little while ago when I changed directions, and I just went around in a circle on it, and eventually it starts working correctly again where I'm on it and I'm not hitting it no matter what direction I'm facing. So, I run off, do a few jumps and stuff, and come back to the dummy, and then I get into the position I started at the beginning, and now I'm hitting it again when I shouldn't be hitting it. I mean, this is really strange behavior, but also just demonstrates, since I'm pointing in different directions, it's not just, the telegraph, fluctuating, or in some way the actual true hit detection. It doesn't really seem to be fluctuating in any way. It seems to be, I don't know, some type of disagreement between the server and my client on my position where it's not updating very quickly at all. I mean, I sit there for a very long time stationary, hitting a stationary target, and I mean, that shouldn't happen. You can see my latency in this clip on the bottom right, by the way, if you're curious about that. But even with really bad latency, there shouldn't be this much disagreement between the hitbox on the telegraph than what actually happens in the environment. Okay, so this last part here is really interesting because I'm on the target dummy and I do a full 360 around it, and you can see me missing, as I should be. It's working correctly here. But then I take a small step adjustment, a very small step adjustment, and all of a sudden I am hitting the dummy when I should not be hitting it because it's well behind me. If you looked at my other video on this, and where the engineer was doing his test on the dummies, he did a very similar thing. He was hitting the dummies, he took a very small adjustment step, and then all of a sudden his abilities were missing the dummy. So it's a very similar thing here. It's like this small movement. It caused the server to start disagreeing with my client on where I was. And you can say, well, that's a latency issue, but I don't think this is a latency issue that should be ignored. I don't think this is an acceptable performance issue. You have these people that are in the chat channel with the dev. They attack me. They try to dismiss whatever I do. And some things they have right, where I was wrong, and I'll admit that. But the things that I post where it's clearly not a latency issue, or it's clearly a thing where it's latency but it's not acceptable performance, they ignore that. They ignore that. They try to nitpick whatever I put up, look for the things that I have wrong, or look for the things that are in a gray area and they are not so black and white, and they harp on those and ignore everything else. These people are doing a disservice to the game, and they are doing a disservice to the players. And this is what I'm talking about. This is the chat room I was referring to. So you have some closed beta testers in here in the chat room with the dev. And at the top there, you see one of the people who has attacked me the most on the forums. And he says he's churning out posts and videos at an alarming rate because I called him on some of his examples. Alarming rate. What do you mean by that, alarming rate? Because many of the things I have pointed out in my videos are legitimate issues, okay? Now, the first video, I will admit, it had examples that were not as clear-cut. They were in the gray area, and some of it, you would say, is acceptable performance because of latency. That's fine, okay? But then I was more careful with some of my other videos, making sure I was choosing examples where it was clear-cut, where it either wasn't due to latency, or it was latency but the game was not working within an acceptable performance, right? So notice here he says videos, right? So he's talking about those videos as well. What is your goal here, by telling alarming rate? Because I'm representing the players. What are you representing? Are you representing that you want to maintain your friendship with the dev? Is that your motivation? What is this? Now, the dev down here says, I watched that video. It was like, yep, you're describing the internet. Okay, well, so he watched the first video, again, where things are not as clear cut. Did he watch my other videos? Is he going to watch this one? Does he think that me hitting this dummy when I'm stationary and it's stationary is acceptable performance? Because if this is happening on the target dummy, well, guess what? It's happening in the PvP arenas. It's happening in the PvP battlegrounds, okay? Only worse, because of all the movement and the turning and the aiming. This is not acceptable performance. I'm going to show a video where I miss straight line tethers and grapples on a target that is not changing direction. It's running straight away from me. And if you look at the telegraph on tethers and grapples, it's hugely wide. It's hugely wide. So there are some major problems with this game with activating ability and getting a reliable and predictable result. Now, all games have these issues, okay? So one of the strawmen they always throw at me is, you expect this game to work perfectly, but latency doesn't work that way. I know that. I've been playing games since Meridian 59. I've played most major MMOs doing PvP, and I have seen issues where latency causes quirky behavior. But in those games, for the most part, Warhammer was a different issue. They had some major issues with latency in Melee, but they actually admitted it and they worked to fix it, okay? But most of those games, these things were uncommon. They were uncommon. They were uncommon enough where I wouldn't actually sit down and make a movie, right, going through it. In this game, I can go into a battleground and look at the footage carefully and literally come away with dozens of instances where the game is not performing in an acceptable fashion when compared to other games. And that's what's important here, because you are comparing this game to a game like WoW, or this game to a game like Star Wars, okay? You're not like looking at this in a bubble and saying, you know, you can't expect perfect latency in this game or perfect performance in this game. No, you're right. But what I'm doing is I'm comparing it to other games that are in the same market. Now, I understand that this game is using a new system, right? The telegraph and aim system, and it appears to be more vulnerable or susceptible, or it's harder to compensate for latency than it is with other games. But when the abilities are not reliable, they're not reliable like this, why should I continue playing? Now, there is still hope, because if you look at the very bottom, he also says, granted, there are a couple of things. Well, I would argue that there's more than a couple of things, but he says a couple of things we can definitely improve still. So my question is how urgent is that issue for you? Are you working on that now? Do you actually have things that you know you can fix and you're working on fixing them? What exactly are these issues that you know can be improved? What will I see from those improvements? Will it improve things like where I don't miss straight line tethers on someone, you know, directly in front of me? Or are you going to fix things like kick, you know, where it's more reliable? So what can I expect to see from that? You know, because to me, this issue in the long term is actually a more important issue than this gadget bug that I posted on my YouTube video. And, you know, I want to take a little bit of time here and apologize to you for that, because I am not trying to make your life more difficult. I know you have a hard job, okay? I know your job is hard and it's difficult. The problem is that you have these people who want to attach themselves to you. They want to think that they're in some type of inner circle and they're the Deb's friends and they are superior players and people to the other people, the little peons, the peasants like me, you know, who bring these things up, and then they start to try to shoot me down, you know, ignore legitimate things, like this guy. After throwing out a few strawmen and engaging in some projection, he says the following. People have been playing Wildstar for a long time. He's talking about people like himself, closed beta tester. Believe it or not, it is pretty unlikely. Okay, so this is
an insult to my intelligence. See, when he says, believe it or not, he's questioning whether I am smart enough or intelligent enough to understand the message that he's trying to convey to me. Believe it or not, it is pretty unlikely that a level 30 something on your first character, oh, you see, so I'm a peon, I'm a peasant, he is in an elite inner circle that has direct communication to the devs. See, he is a special player. He knows things that other people don't know. All right. It is pretty unlikely that a level 30 something on your first character, you have uncovered a veritable smorgasbord of game-breaking problems that nobody has ever noticed before. When this type of thing happens, it makes my year. Okay, it makes my year because I came up and found something that was really easy to find, something obvious to do, something easy to find, a game-breaking bug, not only game-breaking for PvP, but also for PvE. So, to you, sir, challenge accepted, challenge met, challenge shoved right up your pretentious ass. And this is the type of person that has the ear of the devs. And notice in this, you see him, it's the internet. It's the internet. There's no issues here. It's all your fault. It's your fault. It's your connection. Totally dismissing these problems. Unbelievable. And on that game-breaking bug, do I think I'm the first one that found out? Hell no. It is so easy to find and so obvious something to check for. I guarantee you that there are already people who knew about it and they were using it in-game to gain an advantage over other players in PvP or in PvE, talking about going for a world first or gearing up, killing bosses, doing things like this. Now, I think it wouldn't work well in Arena because Arena players are generally more observant and they would have noticed strange behavior like this. But in the Battlegrounds where it's more chaotic, oh hell yes. People could use that and they would never know what's going on because there's so many freaking healers in the game. If you see some guy who's low health and he gets healed up to full, you say, Jesus, man, those guys just have a crap ton of healers. Now, the difference between me and the people who came up or found this, and were probably using it as an advantage, is that I made it public. So people knew it existed, and you know what to look for now, right? You know it exists, you know what to look for, and it's going to light a fire under the dev's ass, and they are going to make this a high priority fix as it should be.